What we're embarking on here is a project or initiative we call it Collaboration Leadership Initiative, which means we have our chiefs and our mayors and reeves, which has never happened before in the last 150 years. There may have been some little attempts, but this is the first major project for our chiefs and our mayors to come together so we can work together. In the territory, we have 19 municipalities. In the surrounding Winnipeg, we have 12 First Nations that have land in the city around the city of Winnipeg or in the city of Winnipeg. And we're hoping to work together on that so we can make our economy better.
The Truth and Reconciliation report recommendations that all advocate and bringing together elected leaders from levels of government, in this case First Nations, Indigenous governments, and public government, with the power and influence they have as legitimate elected leaders, to bring that influence to a common table, to be able to look at some of the driving issues. How do you get to the water? The water affects waste. The water affects how communities are going to survive.
These are people who have the power to create change individually with their own decisions, but together as a group, regionally, based on a consensus, can create huge change that affects the majority of Manitoba. It's a model that could be used across Canada.
We're establishing a relationship that we've never had before in the last 150 years. So we're hoping we're going to be developing this relationship in the next few years.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this historic gathering, which takes place on Treaty 1 territory and is also the traditional homelands of the Métis people. So we honor that historic reality and the fact that we are all treaty people present here today in this process.
Until I sat with Gary McLean and heard of his energy and excitement about the possibility of bringing leaders together. So I came very naive and not very well informed.
We all have a responsibility. We are all directly tied to these treaties.
Through conversations between Bob, Michael, Colleen, I, Gary, we were trying to figure out how to move forward on Lake Winnipeg. And we saw that the challenge on many issues beyond the lake was about leadership coming together to talk to each other.
We negotiated in the Northwest Territories our own self-government agreement with the federal government after 68 years. From the time I was a little boy, it took to finish. So those opportunities don't come very often, and if it comes, take that opportunity as governments come together through you, the elected leaders of this great province of Manitoba.
This is the first time in over 150 years this type of gathering has taken place.
Reconciliation is not only between the governments, but it's clearly going to be within governments as well. And as that reconciliation takes place, you get stronger.
And it's very important that it's held here at the Treaty First Nations lands and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. It's so important that this meeting takes place here.
Tobacco makes the place sacred and allows you to share your life, much of your life and the work that you do for your communities. And then later on, I'll be using the talking stick. Talking stick allows you to feel comfortable sharing.
A starting point for this opportunity after all these years of being apart is how will we get to know each other. This is the stuff of reconciliation.
I mean, it's quite evident that there has been a lot of mistrust over the years, and reconciliation is the idea that we can move forward and work in partnership with one another and understand the history of what happened in this country with Indigenous people.
We're dependent on fossil fuels. We're dependent on hydroelectricity. We should be getting off the grid so that going forward, the generation that's going to come behind us isn't going to be in this jackpot that we're digging ourselves into now.
And they're going to look at this decades from now, a century from now, and they're going to see that this was the turning point in righting a wrong that was there 150 years.
The municipalities see this as a chance to raise the fortunes of all, the high tide that lifts all boats.
Manitoba is the word for where the Creator sits. And so that's kind of what Manitoba, that's where it comes from. We can always achieve more if we're together. And not only to speak of it, but to show the way in our actions.
The collaboration and working together, I don't think it's even an option anymore for us as a region. I think we must do that if we're going to be ultimately successful.
In history, you look at moments in time where everything seems to come together and set the table for those that are in that moment. And there's been a lot of work that has gone on in past generations, in past decades, in the past century that has led to this moment.
There's a lot of fighting in Canada. The whole field of Aboriginal law is about people denying Indigenous rights, Indigenous people having to fight for those rights, most often getting a positive answer in the courts about various things, but still it uses up 20 years to get there. And so I've sort of said, why don't we just skip that whole stage? Because even if we all had all the rights we thought, we still have overlapping rights. We still have jurisdictions that need to cooperate. That's what cooperative federalism actually is. It's the fact that we have governments that have powers. Some of the powers are not well defined. Some of them, like water, are not defined really at all. And we have to sit at tables to figure out what to do.
It's taken us hundreds of years to get to where we are now. And my biggest question is how we break down the barriers.
So we all want our communities to prosper, and it doesn't matter if it's a village, town, city, First Nations community, a rural municipality. And the days of trying to do projects, whether they're streets or recreation or attracting business, trying to do that on your own is gone. And competing against each other, you're just cutting your own throat. You might want sewer and water or like a new highway or whatever, but if it's just benefiting yourself and you're trying to pay for it on your own, you're not going to get funding for it, and chances are you're going to have to put your taxes up higher or find other revenues to sustain that. But if you do it regionally, every community doesn't need a rec center, every community doesn't need a skating rink. But if we can share these projects with First Nations or our next door neighbors, it helps everybody.
There was times when everybody was at odds. That time is gone. We need to be partners. We need to be good neighbors. We need to be good friends.
The Indigenous people were, for lack of better words, they were raped and pillaged. And it just seemed, the leaders of the day, that was what was going to happen. And I was totally ignorant. I was not a history fan in school. I didn't follow it. And the history that we did take was slighted, to say the least, to the way things actually were. And I think a lot of the truth is just coming out now. And I know if that happened to my grandparents or great-grandparents, I would think that some wrongs have to be righted. So it doesn't matter to me if it's the Indigenous people or the Japanese people or even the gay community. It's times have changed, and it's time for us to take the bull by the horns and take the first step.
It's like drinking out of a fire hose. To try and process it and get everything in perspective so that you understand it and understand it clearly. Don't be figuring you understand it if you don't, because that just leads you down the wrong path.
First we just met, and then we got to know each other, then friendships were made. And it's a lot easier doing business when you're talking to a friend.
Becoming friends, gaining the trust again on both sides, understanding and listening for the reason of understanding. Not just to base your own opinion, listen to everything that's being told to you of what's gone on prior to is huge. And that's the only way that we're gonna become comfortable, trust each other, and move forward. And the partnership that's formed will be unstoppable.
There have been barriers and challenges. Some of it might be related to stereotypes that exist out there, as well as maybe just a general lack of knowledge of Indigenous issues.
As we forge through this journey together, I think this has been a good experience for myself. Just to see the openness and the genuine effort that people are putting forward to really work together, create partnerships, and really look at improving the lives of everyone, whether they're First Nations or whether they live in these municipalities or in urban centers.
Our elder, Rodney Burns, his comment was when we started this process, he thought maybe there was a lot that the Indigenous communities could learn from our community. And after a couple of meetings, he now sees it very clearly that we need to listen to the Indigenous communities when it comes to the environment in particular.
As leaders, I think it's a great responsibility placed on our shoulders to take what we're doing here back to our communities and spread the word.
To be able to talk about history, the truth and reconciliation, we're not talking 150 years, we're talking thousands of years.
I looked at the Indian Act, and again, I just saw, boy, what an antiquated piece of regressive legislation, and I can just sympathize with how difficult it is for you folks to have that document changed. What surprises me the most is how much I know about municipalities and how little I know about the communities, the Indigenous communities that are in our area.
Because we've been prevented from participating in that discussion with you. That's the road we got to go down to and have those, those hard discussions. How do we do that?
I think that all the conditions are there to finally move forward from isolation and separation and fragmentation and acrimony through reconciliation into a better way of everybody living together.
So it's the coming together of two worlds, two administrations, two separate entities. And in terms of federal contact, I think to realize that one of the factors in our history has been that it's easier for the federal government to keep us as tiny little individual groups on reservations and deal with us in divisive manners. So legislation, practice is to keep us isolated from one another.
We have to learn to know each other and understand each other. What you said yesterday about the tobacco, that really struck home. You said that meeting would not be official meeting if that tobacco wouldn't be. I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense to me.
To sit at equal tables for the new government that has arrived here, which is only 150 years old, has to be able to recognize where we're at, where we're coming from also. Has to be, and they have to also relinquish their authoritative control over all of our resources.
Urban reserves can pack a power punch in terms of employing people, Indigenous people. Where are they going to spend that money? Right here in the city.
Chief Meaches, can you give us a bit of background on the land that we're standing on here at Capillon Barracks?
18 years ago, D&D declared the land surplus, and two First Nations from Treaty 1 expressed interest in it, and Long Plain and Broken Head.
It was a long process, we know that.
Very long, yeah.
Well, there's certainly huge potential for economic development here.
We're seeing evidence of positive change coming from the development of urban reserves and the investment of Indigenous dollars into the economy. The possibility of developing 110 acres, it's huge. There's sometimes a bit of the unknowns of what does that really mean, right. But I think, in my opinion, it'll strengthen Treaty 1.
And economic growth is a part of that, but our economic development in our communities is what keeps us going.
That is the number one question we get asked all the time is, where's the jobs? I need a job, I want to work, especially from the young people.
The other day we were talking about, we all decided to take this journey together. We bought the tickets and we got on the train, and now we got to get that train moving forward. So.
Absolutely. Chief Meaches, I see a great opportunity, and especially because across the street we see huge developments, and this shows inclusiveness. 55 years that I've lived right here in Manitoba, and 47 years in Stonewall, Manitoba, and I'm pleased to see that we're making progress by this collaborative leadership initiative that has taken place. I see light at the end of the tunnel, that we can actually get together, shared interests, shared ideas, and make it happen.
With all the leaders here, and I'd like to ask Bob Sanford from a UN point of view about yesterday. I was struck first by the fact that the status quo is no longer good enough for anyone. And I think that was a critically important statement. There appears to be an emerging realization that the system doesn't work and isn't in some ways meant to work by virtue of federal and provincial government design. From the point of view of the United Nations. And we look at very complicated problems like Lake Winnipeg, eutrophication of lakes, changes in land use, climate change. And we see that there are mechanisms to address really, really awkward, intractable difficulties. And that gives us hope in so many other domains.
The world won't wait. The quality of life on the earth, on the planet, is vital. And I think it's a non-political issue. It's a human issue that all of us are engaged in.
How do we make our social structure better? How do we look at health and happiness of our people?
Don't have to be afraid of us. We're not a threat.
You are the Aboriginal people, you are the non-Aboriginal people, you're the non-Indigenous people. And you're standing in boxes, and that's symbolic, but it's real. I think we put each other into boxes. Who has saved a life? Wow. Really? Wow. Who has found the meaning of life? Who knows or is related to somebody who is LGBT? And who has relatives of other ethnicities in their families? Who is lucky enough amongst us to have had sex in the last week? Who wants all Manitobans to share equitably in prosperity? Thank you. The idea that we wanted to leave with you is maybe you have more in common than you might think. We would love it to be the most collaborative, consensus-based, consent-based, equal process, but it will be their choice. And then the final stage would be an action plan. We want to say, okay, this isn't just about getting together and chatting. This is about doing something that makes all of our lives better. You're trying to find the place where your interests overlap, each of these pieces enough, so that you can understand how this bit can work together.
And as humans being, we find our place in creation. I think this is one way that we have shared here, and it's an honor. So I ask that you find a good road and walk it in a good way.
We've met with leaders throughout the region, the capital region, and Anishinaabe chiefs here in the south. We've agreed to continue to meet and to build understanding and relationships among the leadership.
You know, our neighbors across the road are no longer to be strangers as part of our efforts here today. The next steps that we'd have to take with each other is to share as to how we're each structured and how each of our systems work.
It's very, very important that we have this discussion with the regions and the mayors of the area. So I'm very thankful where we're going to be heading. No doubt that we need to work together as communities.
This is the great awakening, in my mind, to bring justice and equity and equitability to First Nations and Métis and Inuit with processes that resemble more closely the democratic process of cooperative federalism.
Yeah, I couldn't wait. They come out of the oven and they were steaming hot.
So you had one.
And I thought to myself, am I having breakfast or am I having a muffin? So what the heck?
You stick these biscuits back in there.
Yes. And it's hard to break traditions, and it's hard to overcome what people think, but it has to happen, I can see, especially in Indigenous people. There's such a large population that could be helping this province move ahead.
Thinking regionally to begin with, and including all people and social or economic statuses or positions in life, and thinking what is the real benefit that we can do for everybody in Manitoba or in Canada, and really have kind of a profound change or effect on both the social and the economic drivers in our community, and leaving no one behind, being all inclusive, and really making it a good place for everybody. So that's the starting point for me.
We're competing and we're causing rift between different fractions of our population. And it is, as you grow older, you understand that
it's not maybe such a wise thing to do. And I think that we're moving in a direction now that that can maybe mend something that has been broken for many, many years.
When I talked to Grand Chief Daniels about this, and we've had some conversations at that level, grassroots, where you're talking person to person, that you're going to build these relationships and these friendships and trusts and move this process forward, not at some high level of government.
For a long time, elected officials have let the problems into the hands of agencies and NGOs, which are very capable and fantastic organizations. But this is a really significant change in that, because the elected officials, the elected mayors, reeves, and chiefs are looking at ways to take these issues back, to put them back within their realm into the governance realm. And the governance realm is really where we're going to start to see solutions that will lead us forward.
Have we talked about this idea before? How can our regional system try to achieve something like the circular economy? Think about the fact that we have the lowest waste diversion rates in all of Canada. We want to think about what's the money we're leaving on the table in terms of waste that goes into water. We have a water problem, that's how we frame it. What if it became a water opportunity? Some of the things that are going into water and polluting our water, can we pull that into the idea of the circular economy? The social side of this, what this does to societies when you engage in a circular economy initiative, how you change the fairness and the equity and the benefits. Big, hairy, audacious idea for you to learn.
When you have a system that's been in place for 100 years, you have something that economists call high switching costs. That means it's very hard to move from an old system to a new system. And that's one of the reasons why we're so impressed with the work of the Collaborative Leadership Initiative, because what it does is it provides a framework for the governments to work together and start to build new systems and reduce what economists would call high costs.
Is there a way for governments to benefit from this, where governments are actually in the money game also, where you're not just the money spender, you're potentially the money maker as well? Your governments benefit in addition to the entrepreneurs and the business people. Colleen will explain what your task is in your groups.
Circular economy in a box. As Marilyn said, what we're trying to do is to stimulate some ideas today to give us an idea of what our next steps would be as we move forward. We know we've got waste, we've got a waste report, so we understand quantities. And so there's a bunch of ingredients in here. And when we're thinking about making an economy, we're also thinking about there's things that you might see as a challenge, but there's things we could turn into an opportunity.
So my concept would be to shut down 2/3 of the reservation of First Nations and municipal landfills, cost sharing one site, and then creating a clean energy incinerator, which in turn would sell back the energy to Manitoba Hydro.
Making a mosaic of awesome. That's really all I can think about is when you think of Canada, Canada is a mosaic, and that's really what we want to introduce with reconciliation, that, you know what, this happened, so let's make something better happen now and show the people that the mosaic is a real thing.
And I come from a bias of being a farmer, so one of the things that in our area, in the capital region, and in Manitoba, is that primary agriculture is pretty important, and the environment and water, and we stewards of the land. So I thought, why don't we partner with First Nations, and using agriculture as a base, we can get into manufacturing. Let's build a crush plant. We can do water retention, we can do nutrient loading measuring, we can start protecting the waterways, we can and be a good corporate citizen for us. So that's my pitch. Yeah. Okay, yeah, because I don't see a whole lot of leakage here other than one spot. Well, exactly. Yep. Okay, have a good day, thanks. I'm a third-generation grain farmer in the Oak Bluff area. We're primarily grains and oilseeds producers. Our main crops, basket of crops, are soybeans, canola, wheat, oats, and corn. Agriculture is driven by weather and climate. It's funny, when I get up every morning, the first thing website that I hit is Environment Canada. And we look at, what the weather in the short term is going to bring us, but when we think long term, what are the baskets of crops we can grow in our region? How do we manage water, whether it's excess or drought? We happen to be the biggest soybean producing municipality in the province of Manitoba. Over 50,000 acres of soybeans produced in our municipality. That's my mother.
I wouldn't want to live in a city.
I like it on the farm where it's wide open spaces, and I love the farming, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
It'll all come down to how are we able to manage the water that's required to grow these crops. Driest 6 months we've had on record this year, 2019.
This is a moment in history in which the people decided to work together. Collaborative leadership initiatives in Broken Head, we invited a champion, a young champion dancer, Tyson Prince, who did the chicken dance for us. And right after that, we all joined hands with the mayors, and we did a round dance. And I think that was the first time ever in the history in which you had chiefs and mayors, reeves, round dancing together. And I think that just symbolic, the energy in that room really reflects what needs to happen.
But in Manitoba, we have...
There are definitely things that I've learned that I wasn't aware of, some of the treaties and how they were set up. I was totally unaware that back 40 or 50 years ago that they had to get a pass to leave the reserve for, even if it was for just a few hours, or 2 or 3 days or whatever that it would require. It's just hard to believe that something like that would happen in there. I get emotional about it. Yeah, it's a real black eye for the rest of Canada. I know something has to change because of some of the issues, whether it's this lake or whether it's issues with climate or whatever. The only way that we're going to succeed is by working together.
We have to be committed to the journey of reconciliation and to caring for our lands and our water.
We need to meet each other as people, build that trust. We rely on clean water. We do as people, we do as agricultural producers, we need clean water, and we can't be looking at anybody else to shoulder that responsibility.
Well, what I didn't realize joining this group was basically that no municipalities and no First Nations were ever trying to work together, and in the past 150 years, with Treaty 1 being signed, nobody has been trying to collaborate. And now we're seeing that initiative. We're seeing people being brought in the same room, having conversations.
You're using green energy and hydro?
We'll buy all the land. We'll do it with Sagging, CLI. This is it, the magic pill.
Well, they're projects that on their own are all doable. I mean, I believe anyhow, right?
Getting people to understand the intricate details around getting to where we need to be. How do we improve quality of life? How do we reconcile ourselves not only with each other, but with the environment, the economy with the environment? I always say that our future is one that should be prosperous, but sustainable. But sustainability needs to come before that prosperity. And I think that the values, we all share those things, but we need to know and we need to remind ourselves that everything that we do needs to be based on those values.
I'm confident about our future. And the reason I'm confident about our future is because of our past. And so the history of our populating of the Americas is in our blood. Chinook was an important trade language for us. It was also a fundamental language of reconciliation. When I meet with the chiefs here, they say bonjour. With us, we've incorporated through Chinook, French and English and native languages in the Pacific Northwest. It gave rise to Tulo, one of our centers of indigenous economics, because that word means profit. Lots of people say, Manny, don't talk about tax. That isn't our word, that isn't our language. But it is. I spell it T-A-K-S-I-S. That's the Chinook way of spelling taxes. And it proved to me that we understood the concept, we used it, and it was legislated away from us. The only way we're going to solve our problems is through innovative legislation that brings us back into this economy.
You can't separate tax from government. If you're not collecting tax and getting programs, that's what I call a second-hand tax. It isn't jurisdiction, it's dependence.
Combine. Yeah, it's here.
Do you know what?
That is a combine.
We used to have lots of those. Yes.
I think we've learned a lot since we've started these CLI meetings and getting together with all the Indigenous groups.
Meeting Deborah and getting to know her, and they have, 480 acres of lands in East St. Paul, so it's critical that we know her government and her so that we can work together on the development that they want to do in East St. Paul on their treaty lands.
Yeah. I just think that, like, for Broken Head, as chief of Broken Head, that coming to this table opened up my understanding of municipal governments and how they operate. Also, I think that the Collaborative Leadership Initiative, like Mayor Hart and Mayor Fiebelkorn said, is that it brought two groups of people that all live in the same region and area together to learn and gain a better understanding of one another.
Our municipal lawyer and First Nations lawyer to go and put together a service agreement, and I think that's what has been the arrangement for the last many years, and realized that having the lawyers toil away on the document was not serving any of us well, and we're wasting a lot of money and a lot of energy and really probably ruining the relationship more, having the lawyers working on it in isolation of us.
What we're doing is really looking at this as an opportunity to build an economy so that we can participate in the regional economic development of the area.
Now we're sitting with our council and Broken Head's council, and we're working out what we want to see in the service agreement.
What our goals are, and when we actually move away from, all of the labels, whether we're First Nation or municipal, we'll always have common interests, common goals.
My biggest takeaway from the CLI process, that it changed it from a legal process to a personal one that we're working together on.
We are neighbors. We are neighbors. But what I think that dialogue does is it really kind of identifies what are our priorities. And, we've sat down and we've learned about one another in a really good way. And those are how you build relationships. That's how you build relationships. There's more value in this process. And I think that we, First Nations people, we had been subject to an Indian Act that kind of froze us in time and isolated us from actually being full participants in Canada.
We have to get it right the first time. We don't want to go back and start this all over again. So if the process seems to be slow, there is a reason for it.
Had it not been for that initiative to bring us together, because you can't negotiate, you can't work with people if you don't even know who they are. And honestly, that's where I think we were in the capital region with our Indigenous neighbors. And so this process has got us to a place where we're now able to start to talk about what's important for both of our communities.
Well, reconciliation to me means moving forward, having those understandings of what has happened to First Nations people. I know there's hindrances in the past that wouldn't allow for development in terms of First Nations business, First Nations lands, and First Nations growth. And today we have to look past that and work together in overcoming that. Truth and reconciliation means changing the way we do things.
Tomorrow is going to be the culmination of over a year's intense work between two levels of government that have historically never had anything to do with each other, municipal governments and First Nation governments. And it will give the political go-ahead and commitment to move forward to actual implementation of how do you work together now that you said you will work together.
Elders are going to hand out to all of the leaders an exact restrike of the original Treaty 1 medal. We think of it as closing the circle on the relationship that did start in 1871 with the signing of Treaty 1, but never really fully took took hold, right? These people are deciding that they're going to honor that original treaty relationship.
To try to, together, link arms and move into the future.
Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to the official signing of the Intergovernmental Memorandum of Understanding between the First Nations of the Southern Chiefs Organization, Inc. and the municipalities of the Winnipeg Metropolitan Region.
It is time to make history. I'd like to welcome everybody to a very important day, a day where the spirit of our friend Gary McLean is going to be strong with us today. I want to encourage you to appreciate and savor this moment. As politicians, many are never given the opportunity to be in a place and a time where they do something as significant as what's going to happen here today. Since August 3rd, 1871, when 9 nations gathered, Swan Lake, Sandy Bay, Ojibwe, Long Plain, Roseau River, Anishinaabe, Broken Head, Ojibwe, Sagin, Peguis, Canada, and the Queen. So today, we gather for a different kind of signing, a signing I think that folks looking down on us from the old days would say is a good thing. Stan McKay, one of our elders who's been with us from the start, to give us some opening prayers.
I'm going to invite you to stand for the opening prayer. Nanas Kumoin. So Creator, we give you thanks for the beauty of this day, for the promise of life. We ask for good minds and good hearts. And we give thanks that we have traveled together to this place, to a point of new understanding, of new possibility. In the 4 directions we pray, Sawenimenan, 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 Sawenimenan. May we learn to live, Creator, as your people. Egusi.
That this is a closing the circle, a reestablishing of the original treaty relationship that was established in this very spot 148 years ago.
Many of us spent much of our early life in Indian day schools and then residential schools, and Gary was passionate about addressing that history.
The holder of the talking stick. We had to come up with a creative way to stick within some of the time allocations, and Gary said CLI needs to have its own talking stick, that he would like Laren to take over the role of being the holder of the talking stick.
Definitely a great honor that Gary thought of me to fill that spot where he set the foundation for the group, really. He talked to me about it and said that, he was thinking of me to, carry on the talking stick role. Of course, I accepted it.
And especially honored to be asked to take on this role to help facilitate the discussions.
You want to be here, and you want to work with us and partner with us. You're damn right, we're going to partner with you, but only if you change that mindset. It doesn't allow us to come up here because we're not supposed to be up here. We're supposed to stay down here, but we're not. We're coming up to here now. And this is something like this is what allows us to come up to here.
What we're doing here needs to be put in the media so that the rest of Manitoba sees this is happening.
It's an interesting time in history when we start talking about collaboration and working together. When I first sat at the table here wondering, what are we doing around here, right? What are we doing? And I think the result is, we're not going anywhere, right? We're on treaty lands, we're not going anywhere, so we need to work together and become partners.
The group of people that are signing this Memorandum of Understanding have never been in a room together to work through a process like this, and this document is historic for that reason.
I invite Grand Chief Jerry Daniels.
Our hope is that we are able to bring harmony to our communities and bring harmony amongst ourselves, and that reconciliation is not simply a word, it is an action that society decided to take, and that people decided to engage in that, and that their conduct and their behavior reflected what reconciliation really means, and that is harmony among humans.
I believe this is the birth of a movement. I believe that this is a change in the way people can sit down and have conversations.
The significance of the medal for Indigenous is that many of the signatories to the number of treaties did not read the English language. So any record of the treaty was basically meaningless.
There's hurts from the past that we have to overcome, and by helping each other to understand where we come from, that's only going to help us. And I truly believe that, by creating that partnership and sharing our histories, that we're going to be able to overcome these barriers. And still a work in progress, but we got nothing but time in front of us.
We need to begin to look at this so our children have a future in Canada, but also have a shared relationship with our treaty partners.
We often understand agreements to be lengthy and complex, but the spirit and intent is caught in the handshake. And so you carry with you an image of peoples of diversity saying we're going to share life together on this land.
Forging this partnership, as this medal was forged, it'll show the rest of the country that the original intent and spirit of the treaty, that's walking hand in hand and strengthening who we are in this place we call Canada.
Moving forward with reconciliation and conciliation on shared values, shared beliefs. To me, this is historic. I'm proud and honored and humbled to be a part of it. I have a thing in my mind that Colleen always tells me. She's probably not going to like that I say it, but we're at this stage now, and she will tell me quite often when we're on the phone, let's get shit done. So I would say that's where we're at, so let's get shit done. Thank you.
When we get together, it feels very much like a sacred space. And that's not always the case when we get together to work in my municipality. It's a workspace. We're really on the road to something big and something good. So thank you all. Thank you all.
Pray for all of your families, my relatives, and I look forward to just a great, great journey ahead of us. So thank you for being a part of this very historic moment.
What we have committed to in receiving medals and signs is an indication of our commitment to Bimatsuin. Megan Bimatiswin. Creator, we give thanks for the gift of life. We ask that you look after all of our relatives. We are sisters and brothers in reconciliation. So'eni Minan, So'eni Minan, So'eni Minan, So'eni Minan. Bless us,